This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jupiter, and Indiantown, Martin County's Heritage Station.
And it's time now for Coach's Corner here on WPSL. Actually, it's the Quit Doc Coach's Corner, heard every Tuesday night at this time. And we got a couple of coaches here. We've got Coach John Messina and Fred Almaden. Good evening, guys.
We want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome my partner Fred here tonight. How are you doing tonight?
I'll tell you what, these weeks are flying by. It seems like it's just the other day. We were talking last week, but all's good. All's good. Can't complain.
That's good. I'm trying to sign you to a long-term contract here. And I'm serious on this, so we can have
I'm going to pick
show.
Cliff as my negotiator.
Cliff's the negotiator here, okay?
I can get you in.
See, it's a done deal.
No, seriously, I want to sign this up. So when we start in the fall, I'd like to do the show, obviously on Tuesday nights, first half hour on high school football, second half hour on college football. And
Well,
I'll let you put any promo you want for the Canes in.
I got to wear the hat and
You
the
got to
shirt
wear the
and the whole
hat and the
thing.
shirt.
I'll talk to my agent over here, Mr. Cliff.
Okay,
We'll
we'll
work on it.
But we're getting down. Obviously, we finished the high school season. Everything's just about done except the state baseball tournament. I'm going out on Thursday out to Fort Myers to see Archbishop McCarthy. My good friend Alex Fernandez is one of the coaches out there. They're going for their 7th title in 8 years, which is just unheard of. And they're playing on Thursday at 10 o'clock at the Twin Stadium out in Fort Myers, and they're playing a very, very good Panama City Mosley team.
You know what's amazing? We look at the teams around here. We see Jensen, Vero, all the local teams that we know are good, solid baseball programs. Have some really good baseball players. But when you go to the state playoffs, and if you look at the rankings of who's going to be drafted in June, it's unbelievable in the state of Florida.
Yes.
Who's in those 9 different divisions, and also with 4 teams in there. The talent's unbelievable.
Well, if you go back, and I was talking with Greg about this a few weeks ago, you go back to the state tournament that we ran at the Met Stadium in 2010. In one day, we had Eric Hosmer, Addison Russell, Nick Castellanos, the late Jose Fernandez, and Lance McCullers Jr., and I know I'm missing a bunch of other ones. That was just in one day on our field, and they were all big-time Major League players.
And that's the key, big time. I mean, these are not the 25th man player on your roster. They're all starters. They're young. Again, they're having great seasons. It is amazing, and that's one of the reasons why I hope we would get the state tournament back maybe in the future, because locally you get to see, the best of the best, and we had a really nice run when we had it here.
We didn't have one problem in 4 years. It was absolutely terrific. The one thing that, Coach Fernandez was talking about at McCarthy, the state playoffs are so spread out now that the month of May, they played 5 games in 30 days.
And again, that comes down to if you have one solid pitcher, what we call a big horse pitcher, they can take you all the way to the final game.
Absolutely.
And depending on the rain, because again, we're in the rainy season now, the beginning of the month of May was nice and dry, and you could have got games in, and, I don't know why the state kind of does their thing on the timing, but now you're into that, you get your one player, but, your games could take 5-6 hours with the rain delay. So that kind of hurts in a way.
And also, they've been out of school. Their seniors been out of school for over 2 weeks now. It'll be 3 weeks when the games start, and that's hard to control your players then.
Yeah, especially your seniors. They're going to college. A lot of them, or just getting on with their, they're out of high school and they're getting on with their life, or whatever they're going to be doing. And here, they still have their game, and they want to win the state title or compete for it, and it makes a tough scenario for the coaches.
And a lot of schools have completely finished 2 weeks ago. Not just the seniors, but that's one of the reasons. If you notice, and we're going to talk about this in a second, is the spring football. They moved it up a week to the last week in April because schools are graduating around the 15th now.
Yeah, all the preseason games are done. We talked about that last week, and in about a week or two. Teams will be doing their summer workouts, and but again, it's the state's moving everything up. It's changed. The dates have changed, and it's something you have to control as a coach, because time does fly. But you want to be prepared when the fall, especially for football, when the fall comes rolling around.
Now, after you saw some of the scores and some of the results from the spring football games, anything comes to mind? Anything stand out?
Here's the thing, and we were talking about it at my school at Centennial, is that there's a lot of unknowns this year, locally. Now, we know what Vero has, but,
Right.
Sebastian has a new coach.
Right.
Martin County has a new coach.
Right.
Centennial has a new coach.
Mm-hmm.
PSL's kind of working on, the progress that they're trying to make over there. Central's got their third coach in 3 years, if I'm correct. So, a lot of new factors go into it. That's new styles. In July, we'll see what happens. We talked about that last week with the
who's
transfers or people that can come into your school.
July 1st is the start of free agency.
Free
right?
agency for high school starts July 1. So that could enter into it.
Yep.
And that not only who you get, but who you lose,
Which
which sometimes could be as big as headache as getting somebody in.
I think all the coaches should get in a room and make deals.
Well,
I'm
I don't
not
know.
serious on that.
I'm as
but-
curious as anybody
yeah.
when we get to July and if there is some movement in or out, how that's going to affect the games. Because, you're in July, your games are in the third week in August.
Yeah.
And that's not a whole lot of time to prepare sometimes. And, how it's not only the academic fit, but also how do they get along with the teammates, et cetera.
And I think that the two schools that stood out, obviously Vero, even though they lost some great players, their quarterback, their big-time receiver, they scored 28 points in both halves against Sebastian and Okeechobee, if I'm not mistaken. And, 56 points in a spring game is a lot. And Treasure Coast had a great game against Jensen Beach, who's improved this year. Treasure Coast got a quarterback this year throwing the ball. And usually Coach Jones has been a predominantly running attack. Now if they have a quarterback, they're going to be doubly tough.
And again, just going by the spring game, a lot of times coaches are trying to keep it close to the vest. They don't want things to get out. But, Treasure Coast was putting numbers up, and we know Vero was. So, those are two you'd have to say coming into the season are established, not only coaching-wise, but also with a lot of the players that have come back that would have to go to the top when you're looking at the teams in the area. But, again, you still have to play the games. And funny things happen in the summer. And, hopefully nobody gets hurt, keep everything in check for when the games start rolling.
And one thing we keep forgetting about Treasure Coast, their last win was against the number one team in the state, Osceola, in Osceola last year.
Yeah, that was a big win up there. And, we all talk about the Treasure Coast, and we get into Okeechobee and Martin County, et cetera, et cetera. But, how far can you go in the state playoffs? And for Treasure Coast to beat Osceola, which was a huge upset,
Yes.
but still then the next game, they got beat. But, you want to take the next step. I know Vero is looking to take that next step for the upcoming year.
Right.
So, you want to definitely try and get into the state Final Four.
Right. It would be nice to have one of the
Yeah, it's been many
schools,
years since we
many
had
years.
somebody, get that far. So maybe this is the year.
Right. All right. And we have just had the college baseball regionals chosen. I know you're still in mourning that Miami didn't get chosen. 44-year win streak, 44-year accomplishments that they made the regionals has been stopped. I know you texted me many times yesterday, and you've kind of frustrated your anger, to say the least.
Well, I like college sports and college baseball. My wife thinks it's boring because the games are 4 hours long.
They are long.
They have to do something about the length of the game. But just for the quality of the games, and again, in college, anything can happen, a little different than the pros. And again, the NCAA came out with their rankings. And one thing that was a little different in baseball than they don't do in basketball is they don't seed the teams 1 through 64 or even 1 through 16. Yeah. So they have their top 8 seeds. And they don't tell you like where you're at after that. They just kind of bracket. As somebody said yesterday, it's amazing they don't think that teams in the East Coast have a plane that they can get on to go to the West Coast. So they're trying to geographically place the teams. My beloved Canes, 44 years, had the longest streak in NCAA history for any sport.
Any sport.
So they were the last team out, which kind of hurt, but they didn't. They had a tough year. But, the tournament will start. You have the Gators, who have a nice draw. They're number 3 seed. And then you got Florida State, who's one of the top 16 and playing really well. So it's going to be interesting what happens. You and I both like the NCAA when they get into the Omaha. So college baseball is into their last 2 weeks of the year.
And the long shot that I think we both kind of like because of the pitching is Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and again, when you're looking at 4 games over maybe 3 days, depending on rain, you better have pitching. And Vanderbilt has excellent pitching. You want to get the team that's hot. Florida State right now, along with Stanford, are the 2 hottest teams. Florida State won the ACC, played great the last 2 weeks. Stanford's won 21 out of their last 22 games. So, again, you're trying to stay hot for another 2 weeks to get to Omaha, and then as Coastal Carolina found out last year, anything can happen.
And you look at Oregon State, 49-4. Who has a record like that?
Now
49-4.
Well, here's a stat.
In the Pac-12. Yeah.
Oregon State's the number 1 seed, has 4 losses all year, which is amazing. Yeah. North Carolina's the number 2 seed. I think they have 11 losses. Right. Neither team made the NCAA tournament last year.
It just shows you.
That shows you how far 1 year, a couple players maybe stay away from injuries have had. The number 1 and number 2 seeds didn't even make the tournament last year.
Now one of the things you mentioned, the committee picking the teams and how, it could be a little bit controversial. I watched a lot of the regional softballs and the super regionals. I was very, very impressed with that. Do you know all 16 teams that were seeded 1 to 16 in the regionals, every one of them made it to the super regionals?
I was reading an article about ESPN, how that when they put the female softball on TV, they didn't know what kind of ratings they were going to get rankings, etc. In the last couple of weeks, they get huge ratings. And I'm like you, I don't watch a lot of them, but when you get into games that take an hour, and you got pitchers that are 43 feet away and they're throwing 75-mile-an-hour fastballs, it is kind of intriguing to watch.
And also, I was very intrigued about the stadiums. I mean, they're the same size as our high school fields, but you have 4,000 people at these stadiums. And I was telling you a story before we got on the air. There was, I think it was a game with Baylor and was playing. I forgot who was playing. I think Baylor was playing Kentucky, or one of the SEC teams, and the catcher missed the ball, but the backstop was so close that she turned around, caught it on a fly with her bare hand, and threw out the runner at second base.
Well, that's one of the things that the TV shows about how spirited everybody is because they're right on top of the action. So, you have 4,000 right there, and with the TV going, it's a nice. It is big time, and it shows really well on TV because you got basically an hour, to get the games in, which is different in college baseball.
It's much, and they're playing their 3 games. Unlike college baseball is the same way, but so much different in high school baseball because you got to have more than one pitcher. Now, one of the games, UCLA was playing somebody out in the West Coast, and their pitcher to 232 pitches in one game. Now, think of that, 232 pitches.
Well, they all throw underhand, the pitchers, and so it's amazing, like when the ball comes back to the pitcher, sometimes they can't throw the ball overhand.
That's what happened with Florida's pitcher. They have a great pitcher, Barnhill, and they got beat by Alabama in the first game, and Alabama bunted 4 straight times. And what happened was the pitcher picked it up and she threw it wild to first. I'm saying, why don't you just throw it underhand to first, But great story I heard. Washington was playing Utah, and I was half asleep, and I'm watching the game. And all of a sudden, third batter comes up for Washington. And I'm listening. She says, what do you, they were talking about her, and she wants to be a baseball general manager in the major leagues, which I said, that's terrific. And she's going to Vanderbilt next year. She wrote a letter to Coach Corbin out there, who's absolutely a great coach, and he's going to hire her as a graduate assistant. I thought that was a great story. And then it became even more better when I heard her name. Her name is Casey Stengel. That is her real name.
Now you get stories like that in college. That's great to hear. And hopefully she'll make it, or at least come close to attaining her dream. But those are stories that ESPN loves. And you can only get it in college sports.
Now she made it to the World Series, so they're going to build this up. And think of Washington. But isn't that a great story? And kudos to Coach Corbin for taking this young lady on and teaching her the ropes. And she's going to be a graduate assistant out there, and hope she does very well. All right, so now on a more important topic for you. We're down to how many days to go before the first college game?
We got 95 days before the first game, September
That's
2nd.
the Canes play.
Now, the Canes play September 2nd.
So who plays before that?
Well, there's a game on the 1st, and there's
Okay.
one in, I think it's August 31st. So
They
they're
go
really
out
the
to-
first. So
somebody
it's
goes-
less than 95
Somebody
days.
goes to Australia or something, right? Are you going to
There's-
watch that one?
There's a couple games that
you'll
are in
watch
there.
that
You know,
one.
we don't watch them. We don't watch the ones that are a week before.
You
But
don't watch them the week before.
yeah,
And the Canes are opening up with.
they got Bethune-Cookman.
They're
They're
getting-
getting ready.
So Alabama is opening up with Florida State. Florida is opening up with Michigan. And your beloved Canes are opening up with Bethune-Cookman at
Right.
home.
Well, at home.
At
Yeah,
home.
yeah, at
Okay,
home.
they're not making a road trip, right? They're not making a road trip to Daytona.
Yeah,
right?
they're getting ready because the third week they gotta play the Knowles.
Okay, but I'm just saying, level of competition that first week, you know.
Well, when you get a new quarterback, your
Okay.
scheduling's good. They got. I think it's smart.
So
what
it's
they're doing.
kudos to the scheduling coordinator.
Well, the
then.
thing is, you schedule in advance so
Many,
far, so
many
they
years,
wouldn't know
too.
that. Yeah, but
Okay.
it just does work out this year for them.
And I bought the first college preview book that you and I get excited. We're probably the only two people that get excited in May and June for college football. But one of the things that I noticed looking through this book, they list the attendance and the seating at all the major colleges. I can't get over the amount of seating at the SEC schools. If you take Vanderbilt away, which only holds 39,000, the SEC schools are going to average over 90,000, with 6 schools averaging over 100,000 people. You compare that to the Pac-12, which is great football, and I bet you the Pac-12 is only around 50,000. And, you got the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum in there, which probably are not filled up all the time. But just thinking at the SEC, the money that they generate.
And that's what ESPN loves. That's why the ratings are so high they have their own network, the SEC network. But it's an event, it's just not a Saturday, 100,000 people coming into one event across the state of Alabama, they got Auburn and you have Alabama also. And that's what makes, SEC football a little bit different with the crowds. Now, again, when we looked at some of the other ones in the Pac-10, there's some high-profile schools that you would think, like Oregon. I thought their stadium was bigger than like 50,000.
50,000 Washington
So
State,
it's a little
32,000,
different, when you're perceiving what they are. I've been in the Coliseum at USC, and they kind of block off certain. So even though it holds 100, there might be 75 because they don't let you go to certain part of the Coliseum to make it more enclosed. But the SEC definitely every year after year after year, they're packing them in.
Aren't you pretty far away in the Coliseum? Because that was built as a track stadium.
Yeah, it is. It's iconic because, again, all the Olympics, and they might be getting the Olympics coming up in the next 10 years or so. But you are kind of far away. A lot of the SECs, if you've ever been to the games, you're right there. Yeah. Again, you go down to Miami on a pro stadium, you're closer than you used to be, but you're not right on top of everybody. And that's one of the things. You're down there, you hear things, good or bad, and it is exciting as a fan to be right down on the field.
Now, you had talked about or mentioned about that it's an event now, and you have the evolution of College Game Day, which has really evolved. You went from a 3-hour show to like an all-day show now. I think they start the night before. But kind of a funny story about that. 1986, I was coaching down in Miami, and Alex Fernandez was our star pitcher, and he was only a junior then. And ESPN called, and they were doing a story on him. And the show was called Scholastic Sports America. Young man came down, did the show, they filmed it, they did a whole show on us. We were number 1 in the state at that time, and Alex was the top pitcher in the state as a junior. It was a little heavy at that time, so they were comparing him to a right-handed Fernando Valenzuela. But the young man who came down and did the story was absolutely great guy, and he took Alex and I out to dinner afterwards. And, back then before cell phones, he had the little beeper on. He says, I got to go take this call. And he goes and he takes the call, and he's gone for about a half hour. So we're sitting there. Says, the guy just leave us there. He comes back. He says, I just got offered the greatest job. Well, first of all, the guy's name was Chris Fowler, and he just got offered the game day, which started back then, and ESPN. And he says, look at this job I have. One week I go to South Bend. Next week I go to Ann Arbor. Then I go to Lubbock, Texas. Then I go to Gainesville. And look how that show has evolved,
And not only the game day on Saturdays expanded, but now they're playing Fridays.
Yes.
And they have Tuesday games and Wednesday games. Thursday night has always been a big staple.
Right.
That's an exciting night. But ESPN kind of cornered the market on the game day and the experience, and kind of put you in the atmosphere when you wake up. Now it's on 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
It used to be on at 11, then went back to 10 and gave 2 more hours, and now they're up to 9.
And you know what's funny? When they're playing on the West Coast and they got game day out in Boise, it's 6 in the morning and it's packed, and they don't, I remember last year they went to Western Michigan. They have gone to Army. They have gone to, other places, not in big-time schools, and it just, everybody can't wait to start.
Well, then
the
they
game.
got the signs behind
No,
where they're
Let
talking.
me ask you about those signs. Who makes those signs?
The kids do.
You really think the kids do?
I'm telling you, the
they
kids
hand them
do.
out like certain rallies? I don't want to mention any names.
I'm just telling you, the
Okay.
signs are as good as,
The signs are better.
them talking on the stage.
And Lee Carso, formerly
Who just signed a 2-year deal, by the way, and he's 82 years
he's
old.
82. And
How's that for
he's
the
gonna-
future, huh?
And he was the star running back at Miami High.
Jackson High.
Jackson High School.
yeah.
He always tells you that story, I think a lot of times when he talks to the players, he brings his film in, and they look at him and they look at the film and says, "Coach, this is speeded up, right?" But it has really, really evolved. And so for the preview for this year, okay, and we have gone through some of the rankings, and I'll go through the top 5 that again people are previewing. And these guys are pretty good. They're not 100%. I thought we were pretty close to them. And we're going to make our picks in
We'll make
July.
our picks, yeah. We're
We're going to make
doing
our
that.
picks in July. And then we'll put us, we'll have our own show as soon as I sign you to the contract. Remember that, okay? Cliff, you're negotiating this, right?
Well, remember there is an important part of a contract called consideration. We're working on that.
We're working. We're going to put his sign, your name in the background. What else do you want? I'm giving you.
Oh, the billboards and the spotlights?
billboards.
No problem.
Keep writing
I
it
got you
down, Cliff.
covered. I got you.
Get
Write
it right in,
down. I
Cliff.
got to have a firm commitment every Tuesday, though. But the top 5 that they have ranked are obviously Alabama, USC, Ohio State, Florida State, and here's a surprise, Oklahoma State as 5.
All those teams have one thing in common. Their quarterbacks are all back.
That's correct.
In Alabama quarterback, they have a freshman that they said possibly could be the Hurt
Wow.
kid that played last year, and he was a great player.
He
But
was.
all those 5 schools that you just mentioned have a quarterback that is back, and I think that's one of the reasons why they got him ranked so high, because your quarterback is, a big part of what you need coming back.
And then after that, they have Penn State 6, Clemson 7, Washington 8, Oklahoma 9, and Auburn 10.
And again, Auburn needs a quarterback. They have somebody coming in new. You have Oklahoma. They have a returning quarterback. Clemson's another dark horse. I think they have great players on both sides of the ball, especially their D-line.
Yes.
But, again, they lost Heisman Trophy winner quarterback. So, that's a big void when you're in the top 10, and they play Florida State real early in the season.
Right.
So, Florida State's got a tough schedule. They
got
open
a
up with
very-
Alabama.
yeah.
Third week they play Miami. They're at home at Miami. They play in Alabama, in Atlanta against Alabama, and then they have to go on the road to Clemson
And Louisville.
and Louisville.
And
yeah,
Louisville,
so
with the Heisman Trophy.
I'm gonna
kid
tell you,
running
if
back.
Florida State can get through there with 1 loss or definitely undefeated, they got to be right up there.
Now, if you look at these top 10 teams, what I noticed is the parity. You have top 10 teams, you have 2 from each of the major conferences. Now, if you go back 3 years ago, it wasn't like that, okay? It wasn't like that at all. You had SEC
We have about
dominating.
4 teams in the top 10.
You would have that. But I think the SEC West has gone down considerably.
And again, one of the things on the SEC is lack of quarterbacks.
I'm moving to a new location, and we shut the lights off the other day, and the guy from the utility company that came over, he goes, "You sound familiar. Are you a radio guy?" And I said, "Wow, how would you know me?" And he says, Well, I'm one of the officials at the football games for the high school.
Really?
And I thought, wow, how's politics, you know?
Yeah.
And he said that that a principal was trying to pressure him to change one of his decisions, and he told the principal. The principal used the phrase, you could lose your job, but this guy who's an official, who's a referee, he says, my word overrides your word in a sports situation.
Now, this is the guy you got negotiating your contract here. So you
whatever Cliff says goes. I take it for gospel.
Yeah, well, these they're out there. We never know who they are. You know,
they're lurking.
You don't want to really get to know them either. Okay, you got to let them do their job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were hoping our good friend Danny Neinstein would call in tonight, but we'll get him on another show about talking about the officials, which again, we don't notice them as much as the job that they do. And I think, Fred, you and I, for all these years, have talked about the best officials are the ones that you don't notice.
Yeah.
Right. And again, in the tri-state area, we've coached a long time. We know just about all the officials in any sport.
Right.
And you're right. The ones that, when the game is done, you don't even mention what happened. It's part of whatever the action was, depending on the sport. That's the really good refs. Plus, nowadays in basketball, we're talking about maybe going to 3 refs for all the games. The action's gotten so fast, and some of the refs just can't keep up. That again, it's the ones that keep the game under control that you don't notice. The little things that they say or the way they dictate how the flow of the game goes. That really, when it's over, if you know what they're doing, that they did a good job.
And they worked their way up the ladders too. When I was down in Miami, we had a man named Virgil Valdez who used to do when I first coached basketball when I first started. And Virgil was coaching my JV games at Pace. He worked his way up and did a national championship game in football. And now we got our good friend Olindo Matillo. Why don't you tell the story about Olindo?
Yeah, Olindo is a local referee here, and I'm watching a ACC tournament baseball game, and it's Florida State playing Duke, and they're like in the 11th inning, and I'm not paying much attention to it. And there's a play at the plate, and the umpire calls him out, and he turns his head and his face mask is off, and I'm looking and I go, I know that guy. And here he is at a big time ACC tournament doing a great job. So a lot of the local refs do go further, and he started out just doing local games. So but a lot of the refs that just enjoy doing high school sports do a great job, but it's a thankless job.
Sure it is.
And
they
it's
never
hard
win.
And not only that, it's hard to get new young one. We talked about coaching last week. It's hard to get young refs in because in the beginning you're going to take some lumps, and if you don't know how to have somebody to mentor you, and again it's a mentoring thing. You got to take that advice. Down the road 10 years, a lot of them just quit, and that's one of the problems they're having with referees now, the lack of them. And it's a thankless job at this point.
Lindo told me a great story. We had him come down to talk to the Martin County players about different rules. And, we asked him, give your opinion about some things. And he was talking about how to approach an umpire about a call and this and that. And I said, what's the most important thing for an umpire calling balls and strikes? He says, what you got to remember, strike one is the pitcher. Wants to throw that first pitch for a strike. Strike two is the hitter. You want to hit it. Don't get to strike three, because that's going to be the umpire, because they love to call you out on strike three. So,
that must be the most fun call.
No! A lot of them do a lot of gymnastics while they're making that call.
Yeah, what's amazing, it's just use baseball. Yeah. It's from high school to college to the pros. They all have different mannerisms, the umpires.
They do.
You know what I mean? It's the pro is, again, they are pros, and they have their mannerisms. And then you got college. Again, I like the college baseball, and you have some that have been doing it 20, 30 years, and you can tell who they are, just their mannerisms. And then you have high school, and we have high school refs that have been doing it for a long time, and their mannerisms, and their strike zones, and how they do it. So, again, as a player coach, you have to adjust, and like Olindo said, you don't want to leave it in the hands of the undecided
No,
at the end. And
he says when you get 2 strikes, there's going to be certain umpires. That strike zone's going to get a little bit bigger. One of our good friends here that used to be here, Rick McGuire, who was one of the umpires. Rick used to tell everybody, especially in a blowout game, don't get to 2 strikes because you're going to get to 3. You better be swinging, He says, I got to be home for dinner, on that. What do you think the toughest sport, let's go back to high school for a minute now, toughest sport in high school to officiate?
For me, it's the varsity basketball.
Okay.
The varsity boys basketball, because you got athletes now getting up and down the court. If you have 2 referees, it's so hard to see everything, and sometimes they're getting away with it, and then by the 4th quarter, things get a little testy. When you have 3 refs, they can control it better, but the athletes are just getting so much bigger and faster and quicker that things are happening so fast that, to me, that's the hardest sport right now. We have a lot of refs, the older refs that do 3 that do a great job, but they said they would never ref with 2. They just can't do it, and then they would lose control of the game. But to me, that's the toughest. By far, it's the boys varsity on the high school level.
I think in St. Lucie County, when I left, the rule was you had to do 5 games with 3 refs, and then the rest with 2. And then when you got to the playoffs, everything was 3 refs. But I hope they're going back to 3 refs.
Well, I know it's a money situation, but I think that, a lot of these schools are going to 3 refs. You get a better game.
You get a quicker game, too.
We talked last year about basketball. A lot of it was, the fouls and the free throws, and that was control of the game. But, with 3 refs, you're getting a cleaner game, I guess you could say, a quicker game. And to me, to pay the money as an athletic director, I definitely would do that.
Yeah, and it's one more referee a game, and you're making sure that everything has under control. I mean, if you have 2 refs and one bench is getting on one of the officials and he's kind of glancing over there, that means only one other guy is watching the
Especially
whole
when you got a big crowd, and you got a home game and things are getting a little testy.
Well, at this time, speaking of testing, we got to study for that test, okay? We're going to do that now. More high school sports talk. Coach's Corner on WPSL with Fred Almaden and John Messina. We'll be right back.
There are a lot of groups you can join in high school.
The varsity team,
the drama club,
the student government.
But there's only one with the potential to save over 400,000 lives every year. SWAT. SWAT is Students Working Against Tobacco.
We're athletes.
we're artists.
We're leaders, and we're committed to giving Florida's youth a voice in the fight against tobacco.
Together, we can help to stop the tobacco industry and to save the over 400,000 people who die from tobacco use each year. But SWAT needs your help.
Whoever you are,
Whatever you're into.
wherever you go to school, ask about SWAT and how you can do your part in the fight against tobacco.
What you do today can save a life tomorrow.
For more information on joining SWAT or forming a SWAT chapter at your school or club, contact the Tobacco Free Partnership of Martin County at 772-600-7557 or visit us on the web at tfpmc.org.
And I know you'll be the death of me. I am only so young. And you always got the best of me. And cancer's about to come. And my lungs won't be so beautiful. The coughing's about to come. Here it comes. Here it comes. I can't breathe when I smoke you. I don't love it. I don't love it. My fingertips are yellow because I smoked you. I don't love it.
A message of the Shared Services Network of Martin County and the Drug Free Action Alliance.
Smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. This is just a little reminder for all you cigarette smokers out there.
When you start to smoke, you get a scratchy throat. When you get a scratchy throat,
your breathing seems to wheeze.
When your breathing seems to wheeze,
your lungs begin to seize.
When your lungs begin to seize,
you realize you're going broke.
When you realize you're going broke,
you wonder why you smoke. When you wonder why you smoke,
you could suddenly croak.
So don't smoke.
A message from the Quit Duck Foundation of Martin County.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
And
you're listening to WSTU Stewart.
Well, ultimately, you are listening to Coach's Corner with John Messina and Fred Almaden. It's the Quit Duck Coach's Corner. Now back to the show.
Now, during the break, we're trying to work on Fred's contract. I got my bevy of lawyers coming in here, trying to meet with your consultant, Cliff here. Is it working out? Or?
Yeah, I wanted to tell the lawyers, though, that I'm not a lawyer. I'm a paid spokesperson.
Spokesman, okay.
Yeah.
Not paid by me, though.
No, your lawyer will pay me.
Not paid by my bevy of lawyers will have no comments on anything. But going back to the officials, as we mentioned, and I think you're right, that the toughest job is high school basketball. Football, basically, they go unnoticed unless there's a big call, okay? And hopefully, a lot of times with football, one of the rules as an athletic director I liked is once you get to 35 points, let's get that over with, you know?
Yeah, football's a sport, I think, that once you can see one team's dominating, somebody's going to get hurt.
Somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah, that's a little different than, baseball or even basketball, though. At any sport, somebody could get hurt. But football's one that if you're bigger, stronger, faster, and things start getting out of hand and, somebody could get hurt and injuries could be serious. So, that's one that what do you got, 6 or 7 refs, depending on how many you're hiring?
Five.
Some will go 6 and
some
7
will go
too.
6,
yeah. So,
but you don't want an official you're up 35 points if somebody's one step offside and you're up by 35. Just let it go. Baseball, to me as a coach for many years, just an official that's consistent. That's all you want on that. Somebody that you can. If there's a call that you'd like to know why, you'd be able to approach them. We have a lot of great baseball officials in this area. I would not have wanted been the umpire with the Giants and the Nationals yesterday during the brawl. And what did you think about that?
Well, we just heard now that they gave suspensions down, right?
Right.
And Bryce Harper got 4.
And Strickland got 6.
Got 6, which to me wasn't a lot. I mean, I think they got away. Now, I know Harper's a marquee player. They don't want to take him out of the lineup. But if that helmet goes straight instead of going right, whatever the heck he was trying to throw there, I mean, he could have really did some serious damage. He was only about 10 feet away when he was ready to throw the helmet.
And Buster Posey got 1 for non-involvement.
And he's still watching. He's still watching.
Wasn't that unusual? Was that unusual?
Usually the catcher's the first one to
You think he was shocked?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him, but
he's a good guy. He's a really.
He
good
took
guy.
a heat on Twitter. He took some nasty Twitter remarks because usually your catcher's runs right out and grabs.
The dugout was out there before him.
He was. Yeah, they usually the catcher's out there grabbing, the batter so it doesn't escalate. And this one just kind of escalated, but he's standing right there.
I'm thinking I think he was in disbelief. I think why would you hit him 3 years after the fact that he hit a home run? That's a long grudge.
Yeah, that
Fred.
was I don't know. There's got to be more to it.
That's a long grudge.
And Harper, he's been in the league enough that he knows, what's right and wrong. But their rage factor took over, and then like we were talking before, you had other players who were getting some solid punches in there too. So it was just not those two. But if you look at everybody coming off the benches, I mean, you had a nice little melee. Like you said, the umpires were trying to get control, but once it gets going, it's hard to stop.
He hit him in a 2-0 game, which is still a close game, and the Giants been struggling for every win so far this year.
I went back and saw it about 3 times this morning, and to me, he got hit, but it didn't, it wasn't at the head.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Now, let me ask you this
you
question.
never know.
Why do we have all these fights in baseball? You don't have them that much in basketball anymore, and I'll give you that reason in a second. You don't have them in football. They're wearing helmets all the time, and you're not going to get – you have one-on-ones in football. The pain. Basketball, you know why you don't have them? I think the last big one was the Artest and Steven Jackson fight.
And that's going back a couple years
You're going
now.
back about 10 because the fines are tremendous.
That's why I was shocked that he got 4 games and Strickland got 6.
So for a pitcher, that's nothing.
That's nothing.
That's
right.
maybe 2 games.
And it hurts, Harper more because he's an everyday
that's
player.
4 games. But basketball, you get fined if you come off that bench. I mean, wasn't there a series where the Heat and the Knicks years ago that a bunch of them came off the bench and he couldn't play?
It's the same in high school. If you come off the bench, serious things happen. And college, if you come off the bench, serious things happen. Nobody else got fined other than what we saw, the 4 and 6 games. So all 20-some players that came off from each bench, including the coaches and managers were there, nobody else got fined.
And even in hockey, you don't see them coming out of the box anymore because you let the two guys just
They just let them go.
They get tired.
And that ESPN is carrying that game today. I think the national game tonight, their prime time. So.
And Jeff Samardzic, who was the first one out of the dugout and threw the flying block, is the pitcher tonight. So that should be interesting. But isn't that's kind of unusual? Baseball lets it happen. It's part of these unwritten rules that I never read because they're unwritten and nobody knows what they are until they happen. But baseball allows both teams to come out of the dugout. And the guys come out of the bullpen. And notice they don't run real hard. By the time they get there, it's over with, and they take huff and a puff.
Here's the amazing thing about baseball, and primarily pro baseball.
Okay.
The unwritten rule book is bigger
than
the written rule book, if you think about it.
Right.
There's all these things that when you're little you learn about baseball. They're not in a rule book.
Right.
About protecting the pitcher and blah, 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 and everything that happens.
Running around the bases.
Running around the bases, yeah.
Don't slide into second. Oh, who is
you're up 9 runs, don't steal a base, all that. Where's it at in the rule book?
Don Mattingly was really upset. I got the greatest respect
There's
for
the
Don
Dodgers last week.
Because the guy swung at a 3-0 pitch when they're up 5-0. What's wrong with that? I mean, again, I don't understand it. But let's go back to what I just mentioned. If you did this in high school baseball, your team's gone, okay? If you did this in any other sport, if you had a football brawl and all those guys came charging off the sidelines, high school or college, you guys are gone.
Right.
Okay? Baseball allows that. Why is that?
I don't know. Baseball's a different sport because you got the unwritten rules. Hockey, last night I'm watching a hockey game, and they're in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yes.
In the playoffs, there's hardly any fights.
Right, because you don't want to. You don't want to take
you
a
don't
chance.
You don't want to lose your players.
Right.
In the regular season, it seems like they're fighting all the time.
But it's only one-on-one.
Right, one-on-one.
Because the next guy in, even if he's on the ice, is suspended. Right. So you got to let the two guys go out.
And we talked about officials, but again, officials in Stanley Cup, they get in there and they say, "Let's stop." The players stop. Yeah. I mean, again, that's your unwritten rule that we're playing a hockey game. We're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is different than the regular season. So if you got a beef with a player, get your fight on. Because when you go to the playoffs, it's a different unwritten rule.
And talking about officials, how would you like to be a hockey official?
I'll tell you what, if you watch now they added more hockey officials over the last couple of years because that sport's growing and it's gotten faster. But those guys are excellent skaters. You watch them.
You better be an excellent skater.
That way that puck's going and you're moving and you're trying to avoid the players. That's a lot of people on the ice. That's one thing about hockey. It's a lot different than the other sports because you do have to be, quote unquote, a really good athlete because you do have to put your skates on compared to now basketball. You're going up and down the court, but when you have 3 and you're not skating like they are, you might be the most athletic out of any of the officials.
Now think about all these states, especially up north, that have hockey. Imagine a high school hockey official. That's got to be tough.
And again, the way the officials are, I'm assuming they don't have many of them. Right. You're trying to get people to go into officiate. Now you got to have somebody that knows how to skate or be proficient enough so you're not hurting yourself because that's embarrassing if you're not as good a skater as some of the players. So yeah, up north that's got to be something that it's a big challenge.
One thing that always scared me when I was an athletic director was soccer games. Because in soccer, you get tossed so quickly, or you used to get tossed. Our former Centennial graduate, Adam Zubiega, is the head of the soccer officials now, and he has done a wonderful job in his county. I can't give him enough credit or in this area. And football, you can take a guy down, you get 15 yards. You can yell, and you get an unsportsmanlike penalty. Soccer, you do that, you're get a red card, and now you're out, not just that game, but probably the next 3. But Adam has done a great job with that. But I always thought that the one criticism, if I had one, and the soccer officials got a tough job, is that there are certain soccer officials that let the kids talk to them during the game. It's like a running commentary. And that's probably the only sport. You can't see that in baseball or basketball if you talk to
basketball is a fast-paced sport,
right.
So you don't see that often.
Right.
Maybe during a timeout or something like that. Or baseball sometimes, and again, the longer you're in the game locally, you know the refs,
Yeah.
and they'll give you a little leeway. But yeah, you the really good ones. They'll tell you enough's enough, and don't let it don't go much further. You got to remember that the players change, the coaches a lot of times stay the same. So sometimes there's, a little give and take with the coaches, but the players got to learn, that, you have to abide by what they say.
I remember when we hosted the state tournament, and I always seen it myself when I went to state tournaments, you're going to have officials that you never had during the year because you get a group that never did you or did your opponent during the year, did your games. So I can't tell you how many times there were calls, and always somebody said, well, in our county, they never called that. And it's kind of unusual, but it does happen because that, and kids got to adjust, and kids got to understand that, and you got to go over that before the game. I remember the first year we had the tournament at the Met Stadium, and one of the things that I did with Justin Harrison and with Paul Tagliere is that we met with all the coaches, and all the coaches the day before they played. Now they do everything online, which I'm not real fond of, but I'd like to talk to them in person. And Justin said to me, he says, John, I want you really to go over that you have to slide in home plate. None of this running into the catcher. You got to make an attempt to avoid the catcher unless he's right on the plate. So I went over this, and I was talking to the coaches, and I said, fellas, I got to really, this is coming from the top. They're going to call that. Do you know the first inning of the first game, we had a team from Jacksonville, third batter up, hits a double, runner from first comes home, bowls over the catcher, gets thrown out. And I'm looking at Paul and Justin saying, nobody listens. But and then the guy comes, well, they don't call that in our area. And it's an excuse, but it's tough. I mean, high school officials really do not get the credit that they deserve, and there should be, just like there's an award for the best players. I know we had the T.C. Palm Awards. I wish there was a way that you can give or let the coaches vote the best official in each sport. And wouldn't that give the officials a chance to look, I want to try to achieve this?
Like I mentioned before, there's not enough positive reinforcements to the officials.
Yeah, there's
after a game, I've seen coaches, even after they lost, would say to the refs, you called a good game.
Yeah.
That's a class act on their part. Does that happen a lot? No. But, I've seen in all sports, all local coaches have done it at some time. Yeah. And that tells me two things, that they're a class act as a coach and that they respect the referees. But a lot of times, you have a tough loss, you don't see that. And that's the negative side. And you might have a great game decided, call that could go either way. And things get a little ugly.
The refs are in such a hurry, and I don't blame them to get out of there. It's really hard for you to say that to them as a coach because they're gone as soon as the last pitch or the horn sounds or something like that. They're in their cars and they're being escorted. Usually the athletic director or his designee, takes them out to the car. But I wish there was something that we could recognize. I know that the Treasure Coast Association, Officials Association, does a great job, and I know for many years Justin Lucas was doing the football, Rob Stanton did the baseball, and we had many other people doing the basketball, and Adam, Tony Barnes did the basketball, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then Adam did the soccer, and they really, really do a great job, and I wish there was a way that the schools could give something to the officials. I mean, years ago, I know they kind of stopped it, but the Treasure Coast Officials Association would give a sportsmanship award. And I know just locally, and Centennial was lucky enough to win it a few times. And it was named after a good friend of ours, Jim Thompson, who coached or officiated many years.
Had to be 50 years.
50 years. He did volleyball. He did football.
Did baseball.
He did baseball. He did basketball until his knee went out. I had him 3 years in a row in the state championship, for baseball. And he was a great guy. But, they were giving awards to us, but they wish there was something. And I always thought another positive thing that you could do, and again, I tried to do this when I was an athletic director, have your head of the officials or one or two of the officials meet with all the baseball coaches in the area, or the football coaches in the area. Let's go over some calls. What could be controversial? Look at football when they talk about targeting now. Do the players really, really understand what targeting is? And it's going to be a different interpretation, Fred, for different officials.
Yeah, the college football is a little different than most of them. But locally here in the high school, we don't see targeting that much.
Right.
Maybe the coaches have done a good job of teaching the players, what to do. But, we don't really see it a lot. But, that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, I mean, just, going over that. And I know the big thing now is and it should be, number one on your priority list, it should be safety. How many times you're worried about dehydration with football, with concussions, with so many other things that can happen. With the lack of trainers, that really hurts, because who are you as qualified person to make that call? And if the officials are worried about, targeting for a reason, for permanently injuring somebody or injuring somebody severely, there should be you should have the officials come in and say, look, this is what we're going to call. Make sure you get it down to your players that you're not going to do this.
Well, that's a give and take. That's a give and take that you have between the coaches and the officials. That's what I was saying before, that if you have a coach that's been here or in any sport for a long term, they get to know the refs. And I think, before the game, a lot of times those are things that, will be talked amongst each other. A formal meeting might be better, between the way the districts are set up. Your district games are a little different than just the regular game that you're playing. So, that might be something that you would have in any sport, talk about the little things that really are going to matter in a district game.
Absolutely. So I'd like to thank you for coming on, Fred, and we'll see you hopefully next week. If you're not too busy again, we'll have your contract on the air, okay? And, Cliff will be working with my people to work out your contract, right,
Have
Cliff?
your computer call my computer. They'll get it all together.
We'll get that. But I want to thank everybody for listening, and welcome with another edition of Coach's Corner.
Wow. Another one in the books, as the sports announcer would say, after the game. And, of course, you've been listening to the Quit Dog Coach's Corner, brought to you by the Quit Dog Foundation of Martin County. You might want to Google that and see what they're up to, because they are up to some big stuff with some of our kids out there. Our kids, who? The leaders of tomorrow, of course. Special thanks to Coach John Messina and Fred Almaden for a wonderful show tonight that we'll have all edited up nice and pretty tomorrow, and we will put it on YouTube on WPSLTV.com. Find archives of this show on YouTube under WPSL TV. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, WSTU Stewart, home of Coach's Corner.